So we're here and we have a guest speaker tonight,
We do.
this morning, Stephanie Danielson, who is going to give us a presentation on the MBTA zoning information.
Yeah. Do people want to? I know that screen is a little hard, even for me to see. Do folks want to maybe grab a seat that they have a better view?
I can see it.
Oh, that would be easier for me if you wanted to come around the tables for this portion of the meeting.
That's good, 'cause I
That
can't
way,
hear.
I
I
just
don't
want to be
have to
conscious of the
really
group's
talk
needs.
so loud.
You just get set up and we move on.
I planned ahead.
There we go.
Perfect.
Comfortable.
Yep.
They didn't clean too well today.
I'm gonna get close, because I'm hard of hearing.
Well, that is, yeah, I'm, all right.
Okay, I can't.
So I'm just gonna move it. So I'm Stephanie Danielson. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the town. I work with the Planning Board. We also support a number of other boards like the Conservation Commission, the Board of Appeals, Historical Commission. But today I'm here to talk about zoning, which is something that the Planning Board works on. And in particular, talking about what MBTA communities zoning is and what that means to the town of Easton. Is anybody here familiar with the MBTA zoning? Okay, so we'll start at the beginning. So first off, an MBTA community is one of the 177 communities that has been defined by statute, state statute, is benefiting from the MBTA transit stations. And in Easton, you don't have a transit station, but you abut at least three communities that do. You abut Mansfield, which has a commuter rail, Stoughton, which has a commuter rail, and Brockton, which has a commuter rail, and it also has a bus transit station. And in 2021, the state passed legislation that requires MBTA communities have a zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right. And what that means is if you have zoning that allows a particular use by right, like single family housing in Easton is allowed by right in your residential districts, you have certain commercial businesses that are allowed by right in the business district, certain industrial uses allowed by right in the industrial district. It means that a developer or someone who wants to develop their land for that particular use, they don't have to get any kind of special permit from one of the boards in town. They have to get their building permits. If they're connecting to the sewer, they have to get whatever sewer permits are needed, but they don't need any other permit for the use. They might have to go for site plan review before the planning board, just so that the planning board can determine that how the use is, if it's new construction or it's a new use, that it's not going to have an adverse impact on the neighborhood and that it's not going to cause traffic problems, that people are going to be safe getting into and out of the site. But they can't deny the project. They can't say, oh, we don't like that use, we don't like that project, you can't build it. And that's what as of right means. And effectively, Easton, like most of the communities in Massachusetts and actually across the country, a lot of communities, Easton effectively zones against multifamily housing. Our zoning today is very restrictive. The amount of land you have to have, and then the number of units you can have on that land, which is 10 bedrooms at most. It makes it very impractical for a developer to actually develop multifamily housing. So the state said, multifamily housing works really well around transit stations because the idea is to make it easy for people to do business. We know that around transit stations, you have commercial activity, you have retail activity, you have housing, people can walk to the transit stations. We need to encourage more of that. Communities aren't building enough of that. So it decided that all MBTA communities need to adopt at least one zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right. Easton doesn't have a transit station. We're not in a half-mile distance from a transit station, even at our borders. In that instance, and there are many communities like that that are designated as MBTA communities. In that instance, what the state said is, you're an adjacent community. You still have to adopt this district. It just doesn't have to be located within a half a mile of a transit station. Instead, you should try to locate it in an area that has the characteristics of that type of development.
So every adjacent community is required to do that same thing?
Everyone that's identified as an MBTA adjacent community. And that's 177 communities in Massachusetts. Yep. They're all required. And they're not all adjacent communities. Some of them actually have MBTA transit stations. Some of them are even more rural than, or smaller towns than Easton is. And I'm going to talk about what our zoning needs to incorporate. And those standards are a little different. They're much more strict if you are a community that has a train station or a bus station. They're a little less strict if you're an adjacent community, and they're even less strict if you're a very rural, small town. That makes sense to everybody? Yeah. Okay. So I have several slides here, but I think I'm going to, I'm talking through this. So the basic requirements I talked about, it has to be allowed as of right. So it doesn't require the planning board to review it and issue a special permit. Easton does allow some multifamily housing under its zoning, but it requires a special permit. So the developer has to come to the planning board. They have to meet certain requirements. And the board basically can say if they really don't feel that project is going to work or that they like it being built in Easton, they can vote it down. So this has to be by right. It has to be at least 50 acres in total. Now, it doesn't all have to be in one location. So you don't have to have a zoning district that's 50 acres in total. But you do have to have one that is at least, you can have sub-districts, and at least one of those sub-districts has to be 25 acres in total. And then your other sub-districts can't be any smaller than 5 acres in total. And that will sound like a lot to you at first, until I start showing you where Easton is really interested in developing their multifamily by right zoning. It has to be able to accommodate a minimum of 15 units per acre. So you can't say, oh, we've got our multifamily zoning district, we have 50 acres, meets the other dimensional requirements of 25 contiguous acres and the 5 acres, but we're only going to allow 10 units to be built on any acre of land. The state said it has to have at least the ability to accommodate 15 acres, 15 units. And that's like bedroom counts or housing units. So if you're doing residential rental, that would be 15 apartments.
So are you saying the state is saying that all these communities have to put this in, and is there a time limit?
They have to adopt the zoning. There is an adoption by date. You do not have to construct. Okay.
So it's not mandatory to
That
build
was
all
a
these
that
things.
it is not mandatory to build. The state can't tell the towns. Number one, towns aren't builders. That's not what towns do. They set the rules by which someone can come in and build within your community. And sometimes the town will support a project. And the town has supported some multifamily projects under the 40B as a friendly 40B, where the town has some control because they're working with the developer on Usually not the location, but if there's mitigation, like Avalon, when that was built, they were going to need to construct a wastewater treatment facility. The cost of that was going to be pretty much equal to what it would cost to bring sewer from Mansfield to Easton. So the town officials said, well, why don't you pay, instead of building your own your septic system or sewer treatment facility, why don't you pay us and we'll have the sewer line brought down from Mansfield at the same, it would cost you to build your treatment facility. Then Easton can provide sewer along Foundry Street in that sewer district. So that's how we got that. But that was, again, that was a special process and a special permit.
Why did they allow so many apartments at Avalon?
That's what Avalon was looking for, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And what that means to the community when you build, or that number of units of housing are built, because that's a question people have had. So again, it has to be 50 acres. It has to have allow 15 units per acre. The zoning cannot restrict or limit occupancy by age. You have to be able to allow families if that's what a developer wants to build. It can't limit the size of the units. It can't say they can only be X number of square footage. Usually a developer, from a practical standpoint and economic, they know what a reasonable size is for a unit, but the town can't dictate that. And it can't limit the number of bedrooms. So again, a lot of communities may allow multifamily housing by right, but they restrict it to a single bedroom because they, for some reason, don't want families. In this case, the state says you can't restrict the number of bedrooms. Okay? This slide says it has to be within a half mile of a transit station. As I explained earlier, Easton is an adjacent community, so we just need to put in a location that makes more sense for the town and the community at large.
So they cover themselves by saying where possible.
Exactly. Okay. So again, the law does not require that the new housing be developed. There are no, and I'm sorry, I'm going back because I haven't talked about the deadline and you asked about it. As an adjacent community, Easton has to adopt this zoning by December 31st of 2024. Okay, and I'll go over kind of the timeline of what we've been doing and when it all started, because that may sound quick to you, but we started this process when the state came out with their guidelines for this zoning back in 2022. Okay. It doesn't require communities to pay for infrastructure to support the housing that might be developed under this new legislation. And this references Section 3A. This legislation, what it did was it amended the Zoning Act, which is Chapter 40A of Mass General Law. And it added Section 3A that talks about the requirement for this zoning. It doesn't override the Wetlands Protection Act, so your district needs to take into consideration if there are wetlands, which would limit your ability to accommodate 15 units per acre. You still have to comply with the Wetlands Protection Act. It doesn't bypass the local bylaw. The local bylaw on wetlands protection still holds. And it doesn't provide for options or waivers or exemptions. Communities have to adopt this. So the question is, I'm going to skip to, let's see. Oh, I don't have it here. I mean, all this is very much a recapture. So what happens if the town doesn't comply? Well, the state says you don't have to build the infrastructure. but a lot of the infrastructure gets paid for within communities. Sewer collection systems, roadway improvements, and other things get paid for by state funding or are aided by state funding. And what they've basically said is communities that don't comply will become ineligible for certain state funding. And for other state funding, they will get a lower preference when they submit requests for funding. So what does that mean to Easton? Like, what kind of funding are we talking about here? Well, this is just an example from 2011 of the type of funding that Easton has benefited from. So in 2011, the Northeastern Village, we received $1 million that helped with the sewer construction there and also the Main Street improvements. In 2017, we received another $1.5 million. That was kind of a next phase of the improvements that were planned in 2011. The Furnace Village Sewer District received $1.5 million that helped to offset the cost of the betterments to the residents that live there. We are in the process of planning for roadway improvements for Foundry Street that will include traffic management and will include sidewalks and bicycle accessibility. We've received some planning, other grants, housing choice capital grants. So that's the MassWorks project, the funding. MassWorks funding has been the state's key municipal infrastructure assist program for the last many years, so at least 15 years. We have received funding, I mentioned the Five Corners Sewer Project, and we received, in that one, we received $250,000 towards the design. The MassWorks grant was actually for the construction. We have another $250,000 for the roadway design, the improvements for the roadway design, and then doing an assessment on the capacity of Brockton's wastewater treatment facility to accept wastewater from the industrial park. And then there's the Complete Street program, which provided $400,000 for the sidewalks along Lincoln Street to Bay Road. This year alone, we've received an award of over $400,000 for various planning grants. Some of the other reasons Easton wants to comply with this: it helps achieve our housing goals that have been outlined in the Affordable Housing Action Plan, the Envision Easton Master Plan. It's also referenced in the age-friendly plan, that we need options for people that just aren't the larger, quite expensive single-family homes. And, you know, I was thinking about this as I was preparing today for the presentation. The select board, and let me just go to this before I mention that. I'll go through the timeline of what we've done. So basically, what has Easton done to prepare for this? Back the end of 2021, we received draft guidelines from the now Department of Housing and Livable Communities. And they asked communities to review the guidelines, hold a briefing, have the select board or city council hold a briefing on the zoning to help the board understand what the zoning was about, as well as the community, and then to prepare comments. And that was a really helpful process, because one of the things the guidelines didn't allow for in the beginning was an affordability requirement. So I think you may be aware that part of 40B is you have to have 10% of the housing of a 40B has to be affordable. And this zoning guideline did not include allowing towns to require an affordability component. So that was one of the changes that they made. And then also allowing mixed use, which you can do as long as you can demonstrate that you would still be able to get the 15 units per acre with your zoning. So the select board held that meeting. They were briefed on the requirement, and they established a volunteer, a representative board made up of board volunteers to review the guidelines, draft the town's comments, and also look at areas that would be suitable for this type of development. That group at that time decided they wanted some guiding principles and goals for the zoning. If we have to do this, we want to make sure that it works with what Easton wants to do and what our plans for housing and development over the next 20 years is. As we've defined in the town's master plan, the housing production plan, the age-friendly communities, all those plans that the town has worked on to kind of say, this is the direction, this is what we want the town to look like in the future. So they set goals and guiding principles to inform the zoning. They met for a couple of months. They came back with that, the comments. Those were submitted to the select board at a meeting, and then they were submitted to DHCD. We waited for DHCD. It took them almost a year to incorporate all the comments that they received from the communities, and then they issued their final guidelines. We decided we weren't going to take any additional action. There were some communities that did, but Easton actually had done a lot more work and had done a lot more work in supporting housing over the years without this mandate, that we felt, okay, we're going to wait and see what the guidelines have to say, and then we'll start moving forward. So in September, the planning board looked at the 8 districts that the implementation review team thought might work, and they narrowed that down to 3 districts. And then they began holding public hearings in October. There are going to be ongoing meetings. At the end of the presentation, I will go over what the planning board actual hearing dates are going to be, but I will be doing this presentation with the chair of the planning board, with the chair of the select board, to pretty much most of the main municipal boards and committees in the town over the next 2 months. So the potential districts. So again, one of the things that everybody's worked really hard on during this process is to make sure that this zoning is the best possible it can be for the town of Easton, that it works for Easton, and that it takes into consideration all the proactive efforts the town has made to meet the town's housing needs, and that it is located in areas that have already been identified for similar type development. This area, you'll recognize, this is Foundry Street in East, where it turns into Eastman Street. Up here is Avalon, which, if you look at it and you calculate the units per acre, it is like 14.5 units per acre. And what that really demonstrates is what something at that density looks like. I don't know about you folks. I think when it was first there, especially without the new units that they put in front, it kind of looked a little bit like Oz. And with the new units, it actually kind of marries well with the shopping and the retail uses there along Robert Drive.
It's just that there's so many.
There are,
You drive through it, and it feels like there's 1,000 units there.
but it's only 288 units.
I didn't realize that.
And actually with the new units, it's a little over 300.
300.
Yeah. So this is
Avalon? Did you point it out?
I'm sorry, Avalon is right here. Can you see that?
Your cursor's not showing.
Oh, it's not. All right, I'm gonna stand over here. This is Avalon, right here,
Oh,
okay? This is Target. This is the shopping plaza, Highland Plaza itself. This is, I can't remember, I think that's Bank. And then you have Easton Savings Bank here. There are two empty parcels here. This is a mixed use of retail and office, a small retail office building. This is a warehouse.
Well, that's well developed. Where are they, if that's a potential district, where are they looking in that area?
It doesn't have to include, and your district does not have to include any vacant land. The only vacant land really is this area right here.
That's already been developed. So
It's already been developed.
That's no longer a potential district.
It is. It does not have to include vacant land. It does, our district here does include vacant land. The state's just saying, so the only opportunities would be to develop this area, which could be, and there had been some interest even before this zoning was announced into developing this under the current zoning for some multifamily housing with mixed use. You'd have to redevelop. I mean, if someone wanted to come in and redevelop, that they would be able to redevelop under the zoning. If the zoning's adopted, they would be able to come in and redevelop under the zoning. So it's not likely, I mean, right now what we're seeing is because of the development at Avalon and primarily that there's appears to be a lot more activity of the commercial uses there, which is really what you want. The idea of developing housing near services, near shops, is to provide opportunities for people who live close to do their shopping there, to go out to eat. It's really close to New Pond, and I'll talk about that, the proximity to open space. So these were things that the board was thinking about, that the implementation team was thinking about when they looked at these areas. Okay, is it in proximity to services? There are opportunities for jobs there. I mean, these businesses hire people. So some of the folks that live at Avalon or might live in some new housing there, they could take advantage of job opportunities. There are, like I said, a lot of services there. This is all walkable right now. Robert Drive has sidewalks. The plan for the improvements along Foundry Street include sidewalks, and right now we are expecting that the sidewalks will be on the north side of the road. So that would be a connection to open space for people to recreate.
and can you walk from that complex of Robert Drive to Five Corners?
That is the plan for the roadway improvements. Now, I will say, we are in the process of the early design phases. It will be approximately 8 to 10 year time frame before it actually gets built. But Depot Street was the same thing. It was a project that had been on the planning board for a while before it finally gets done. These things sometimes take a little time.
And nowhere else in the town consideration, I feel like I'm missing something, because the goal of this zoning rule is so that towns will be required to build more multifamily units, correct?
No, you're not required to build it.
But that's,
You
you're not
just have-
required, but it is an encouraging towns to build more, you
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah.
So are there other
Yes.
parts?
So there were, I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, so from the 8 areas, the planning board narrowed it down to 3 potential districts. So I just covered the Boundary Eastman District.
Thank you.
This district is at the corner of Belmont and Washington Street. You may recognize this as the marketplace, which is a highly underutilized parcel of land. And you have Stonehill College here. Right here are Belmont Arms. These are existing apartment buildings. And then this is IBC, which is a manufacturer. So this area has some opportunity for infill development here. And there's been some interest expressed by the property owner of this property, who now owns these 2 properties, in doing some multifamily housing if that were to be allowed. The town adopted you'll recall, new zoning along Washington Street between Belmont Street and Depot Street to try to encourage new development and redevelopment. We've seen a little bit, but not much there. This might be an opportunity and might encourage someone to do some redevelopment there. As I pointed out, there's a lot of missed opportunity with the marketplace that could be redeveloped, and it might not be immediately after the zoning's adopted, if this is one of the sub-districts, but somewhere down the line. And I understand your point, your question, but I think that's the state's recognized. I don't know that the state has the power to tell a town you have to build something.
That's
So
a huge
you have-
loophole.
I'm sorry?
It's a huge loophole, not requiring the towns to do it, just saying you have to plan to do it.
Well, what studies have found is that the reason multifamily housing doesn't get built is because the zoning doesn't allow it. And that developers will develop if something makes sense economically. I mean, that's kind of how our country operates, right?
Right.
If something makes sense economically, someone's going to come in and they will build it. If it doesn't make sense, and when you have zoning that's so restrictive and difficult, and you have to hire lawyers to go through a special permit process, and it takes, a year. Some of these, some of the 40B projects you hear about in the state, it can take years because communities are holding up that project because they just don't want it. This is actually giving towns an opportunity to say, here's where we think multifamily housing would make sense for our community, and allow it by right.
And just one comment, I have heard discussions in town where some people are quite opposed to this because it will impact the values and so forth and so on. And what I feel very strongly about is that by not building more multifamily homes, it restricts the diversity, equity, and inclusion. That by having such restrictive zoning that requires single family on large lots means that a more diverse population is not able to come into town, and I think that's very problematic.
I agree with that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's really interesting because yes, people have said that. I did a presentation to one of the boards, and one of the members actually, who is fairly new to Easton, was concerned that if we put these big apartments, see, this is what I'm hearing mostly is, big apartments developments all over Easton. It's going to spoil the small town character of the town, and it's going to decrease our property values. Well, I know you look at Avalon and you see a lot of housing and you feel like it's very dense.
monstrosity. I just think it's awful.
I think some people do. I actually like it. I go through and I feel like it's a neighborhood and you drive through it. But it's one development and it's located in one part of town. It's not in the middle of town. It's not in the middle of one of your traditional residential small lot neighborhoods like Hollis Drive and along Depot Street and Prospect Street. And that's not where the district's being proposed. It's not being proposed in that area. But if you look at the statistics, and I don't have it with me today, it will be up on our website. We do have a web page, and I'll share the link with you before I close today. It's Zillow data, but it's comparable. And the value of Easton's homes have done nothing but continue to increase. Now, they're increasing across the country, but they're also increasing at a rate that's higher than most of its neighbors. The diversity of the town, since I started working for Easton in 2006, I live in Brockton. And since 2006, the population in Brockton has changed dramatically. I mean, I go to when my husband and I leave town, we go out and we're like, oh my goodness, where are all the people that look like the people we have at home? But Easton, because of the new housing opportunities, both at the high end and at the more affordable end, its population has become much more diverse than it was in 2006.
Which is a good thing, and this would increase.
Yeah.
Having more multifamily homes would increase the diversity.
Yeah. The other thing we hear is, oh my goodness, it'll bring lots and lots of school-age children. And, it'll overcrowd the schools. Well, the new Avalon brought in, when we did the numbers in 2019, the number of new kids or kids in the school system coming from the apartments was 81, and today it's 110. That's not a big increase.
It's not.
It's not. And Easton's school enrollment population peaked in 2009.
Say that again?
It peaked in 2009.
So does this actually help in terms of the amount of money the schools get if the number of children increases?
It supported the need for a new school. I mean, the town doesn't help, the state doesn't fund projects where school enrollment is going down. So you have to demonstrate that it's at least stable and going up. And as I understand, it's not as directly, the programs, the funding programs aren't as direct, but I think another concern people had was there will be more kids with special educational needs, and according to the superintendent, we get funding to help pick up any additional services, the cost of additional services for children that need those. Good questions and comments. So the third district is up by Roach Brothers. This is one of the areas that if the South Coast Rail ever did move forward, the MBTA is identified for a train station location. And if it ever did move forward, the town would need to have a district that was within a half mile. So this would meet that. It could be part of the zoning now, or it could be included at a later date. What you see here, there are condominiums here that exist, and there's some opportunity for development there. The goal of
That seems like the most logical, because traffic patterns, I mean, if you put in 50 units or something, that's going to increase the traffic, like Avalon did on Founder Street.
we are doing, we are undertaking a traffic study to do projections on how much it might increase traffic. But if you look at Foundry Street, I don't have that right handy. Wait a
Is it
minute.
more than
Hold on, it's on the next slide. No, it's not. It's only the Washington Belmont and Washington North are both 38 acres. So if either one of those were selected, another district needed to be included. It really, again, from my standpoint and what I've seen, that from the town's plans and what they're looking for, I feel like Eastman Foundry is the best location. If the town only wants to do a smaller district and not do multiples.
Eastman Foundry is near Target.
That's the one yes, that's the first one we looked at.
It's Avalon.
Right.
That's already been done though. That's completed, is it not?
Avalon's completed. But what I'm saying for your district, I think that one just makes the most sense.
Is there ever a consideration of the Roach Brothers area to put in sewerage?
Not at this time.
That would.
And I mean, that's another reason the Foundry area makes sense, and also the Belmont Washington Street.
So multifamily unit capacity for Eastern Foundry is the capacity for 1,000 units, and there's 300 there now. So the potential to add 700 units.
Yeah, but
Exiting onto Foundry
it's
Street.
very unlikely that would ever be developed that way.
I would hope not, because I can't get out of my driveway.
And the other thing to take into consideration is, so to get to 1,000, and really what we're looking for is 913. To get to 1,000, you'd have to redevelop
You have to tear
Target
down Target.
and the plaza, the shopping plaza. And if you did that, all that traffic that's being generated would go away. And it would just be replaced. It's not like you'd be increasing it. You'd have to redevelop those areas. So it'd be an offset on the number of daily vehicle trips coming off Robert Drive. It wouldn't be an increase.
But they're gonna redevelop
Necessarily an
the road
increase.
down on Washington Street, down by Roche Brothers, where there's all that vacant land. And Foundry Street cannot handle any more traffic.
A lot of this land it looks like there's a lot of land, but it really is not. You've got wetlands over here. This is why the acreage is so low, because that's the developable acreage. This is wet. I believe this is the basin, their stormwater basin. And you'd have to have stormwater management for any development that was there. So that doesn't go away, even if you redeveloped that. So there's really not a lot of new developable land here.
And how many units could go in there?
That number says 665.
And there again, they'd
But
have to
again,
tear
it would
down
be
what's already
redevelopment.
which I don't think would be done at either location. I mean,
Right.
both developments, both shopping areas are fairly new.
Right.
I don't see anybody voting, let's rip down Target and put up an apartment building. Let's rip down the rest of that mall and put up apartment buildings. It's part of the town now. It's been, what, about 15 years is all it's been?
Right. Right. And no one's going, I mean, if the business is thriving, the business is not going to look at that and say, because presumably the people who own Target aren't people that are just, oh, we're going to tear this down and put up multifamily housing. That now maybe in the long run, maybe that would be more profitable, but there's a period of time where you're not earning the making a profit on that business.
I think any of these considerations by the town need to take into consideration sewerage.
Which you have on Foundry Street, and you would have Belmont, Washington.
And I'm just in terms of the overall town, putting in sewerage allows for a lot more businesses, restaurants, hotels, all of that, that would generate money that could help
That
in the other.
correct. Yeah.
For the finances.
Right.
But isn't there a limit on how much sewerage can go into Mansfield?
We are not at capacity. There's plenty, we have plenty. So one of the questions that was asked at one of the early meetings from residents along Foundry Street was, I haven't tied into the sewer yet, but I'm being charged a betterment, and I want to make sure my capacity is reserved. It is reserved, and we still have more capacity. We're planning for a pump station to allow additional flow into Mansfield for the capacity that we have. And if we were ever to really hit a limit, we would go back to Mansfield and execute another IMA, intermunicipal agreement.
And near Roach Brothers, wouldn't there be consideration of doing something with Stoughton?
You know,
Maybe I'm going in a direction.
I mean, I think what the town has looked at is where is the most potential. One, to tie in existing businesses. It's quite an expensive enterprise. I mean, you look at Foundry Street, you have quite a few properties and opportunities for people to tie into the system. It makes sense. The same between in the Queesit Commercial District where the sewer exists. But up that part of town, and the availability of land is also, I mean, that's the other part of this is while the state looks at maps, I mean, I have developers call me all the time. They want to build big things because there's this big swath of land in Easton. Well, I'll pull it up and I'll say it's either town owned, you know, the town has owned it and preserved it as open space, or it's like, yeah, at least 25-50% of that area is wet. It's not developable. So
over by CVS on, I guess it's Washington Street.
Yep.
Isn't there are new units going in there with retail at the bottom?
You're talking about the
Right next to
Queesit
Stone
Commons, right? Queesit's Common, the 40R. Yes, and that was one of the areas. That area there was considered as a sub-district, but because of the 40R and the way the zoning was written, and you can't obliterate it. It has restrictions that the state would then find not allowable. The zoning
So
would be compliant.
40R is,
A 40R was zoning that was encouraged by the state, and it was supposed to be what we call smart growth, more transit oriented, and located right near transit centers or near major transportation corridors. That is about 1 mile or just a little over a mile from Route 24. And the state gave communities incentives for this mixed use development.
but it doesn't count for what we're discussing.
It won't because of the way the zoning was written. It's too restrictive, and we'd have to go back to the state and make
Does it have
changes.
age restrictions, is that it? Or
Not
we
because
don't
of the age restrictions, it's really because of the fact that the developers agreement that was entered into with the town requires mixed use on several of those buildings, and that would be a restriction that would be
know? So because
non-conforming.
there's a restaurant and retail and all that business.
It's not because it exists, it's because if you were to build new, there would be a requirement that you have mixed use in several of the sections of the 40R district.
It's complex.
It is. We looked at that, we thought, oh, this is and you know, we added a few parcels when we were looking at it initially and thought that would be a good area, there would be opportunity for some new development there, but then the state kind of came back and said, no, not really, if it's restricted.
With her question about Stoughton, I'm not sure, is the sewage tied in with the MWRA rules because Stoughton has the MWRA, we don't? Is that part of a restriction why we couldn't tie in with them, or?
I don't, I'm not saying that we couldn't tie in to Stoughton's. I have not been privy to any discussions with Stoughton or any.
I just didn't know if it
or-
was restricted because they're an
I
MWRA
don't,
community
yeah, I don't know.
and we are not.
I don't know that.
MWRA is, tell me what
I
that
think
is.
it's water and sewage.
Massachusetts Water Resource
So did they have sewage?
Agency.
Well, that's what I don't know if sewage is included with them or not. I mean, I know Boston's the Boston Water and Sewerage. I don't know if the MWRA has both, that's kind of what I was asking.
That could
And if
be,
it was, would that be a restriction to why?
that could be a key piece of information to have.
Just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. All right, so the meetings where the planning board is going to talk more about the districts and finalize the zoning are January 10th, next Wednesday. And at that point, they're really going to talk more about the North Washington district and the Belmont Washington district. We've had a lot of discussion and a lot of input from residents in the area around the Eastman Foundry area. And so they're going to focus on that at that meeting. And
If I may, I'm gonna take. a picture.
absolutely, because then you'll get our the link to the website. And that has a lot more information. You can go to it. We're updating it on a somewhat regular basis, especially we have a questions and answers. So as those questions come up, we capture them and provide answers. February 12th, they're going to review and finalize the districts. This timeline is necessary to be ready for town meeting. I mean, that's the plan. The plan is to have a district that gets presented at May town meeting and gets voted, and we hope gets adopted. I mean, we hope people see that enough thought has been put into this and where the districts are being proposed, and that again, we're coming up with the best solution for
Are
the
these
town.
meetings open to the public?
They're all open to the public, yes. And when you go to the website, so in addition to these meetings where the board is actually deliberating, having conversations and discussions on the zoning, I mentioned earlier that we're going out and we're doing more presentations to boards and committees. There's a whole schedule of those meetings, and those are all public meetings as well.
I'm surprised that this is even negotiable. That it seems like the state put this out there, that this is required, right?
Yes,
So how is it, can Easton say, and this is controversial because I've heard people opposing this and some supporting it, but how could Easton vote against it if isn't this a?
so far, I think there have been 5 communities that have actually gone to town meeting, and it's passed in all of the communities. It's passed by small margins. They haven't been, so the zoning in the past in Massachusetts has always required a supermajority, a 2/3 vote, okay? A few years ago, there was an amendment to the zoning act that if your zoning provided multifamily housing, and I'm really making this kind of an easy, it's a little more complicated than that, but not much. If it supported multifamily housing, it only requires a majority vote. This only requires a majority vote.
But how could they vote it down if it's required by the state?
Is the
You
vote
can?
for the parcels of land or for enacting something?
It's for the districts, it will be voting for the finalized district to approve the district, and then the language of the zoning, which basically is, I can go back to that slide.
You hear when she mentioned that if it's not passed, we lose
That is,
Remember
yeah.
if you were here before that was mentioned.
I may have missed.
Yeah, so if it's not passed, we lose some state funding.
Yeah, I
for
was
a
going
lot
to
of our
go back to
projects.
that. I mean, that's what you lose.
I
and
think she missed
Yeah,
that.
oh, okay. So then within the zoning, we're going to change a section of the actual language of the zoning that defines what the yard line setbacks are. I think everyone's familiar with what that means, you know, how far a building has to be from the abutting property lines. A minimum open space requirement, the maximum number of dwelling units. Again, your district has to be the number of floors and the parking spaces. And there's a draft of that, of the language on the website as well.
There's apartments going next to Harbor One Bank, out by Shaw's at 5 Corners. I think there's 15 units going out there. There's a big.
Okay,
parcel-
hold on. Harbor One on, oh, the 20, yes.
20 units?
On Foundry Street, 424 Foundry Street.
Do those
They have been permitted.
figure into any of this?
No, because it's not within an MBTA zoning district. So,
Why is it not?
because we are only, the districts haven't been established yet and won't be unless they get voted at town meeting. But it's not within one of the areas that were determined, yeah, right, being proposed.
What did you say?
Proposed, one of the units proposed, or is proposed.
Those are being developed under the existing zoning.
I see, okay.
And that was a special permit. That had to go, the planning board had to issue a special permit for that project. They
And-
couldn't just say, hey, we've got this parcel of land, we're going to build 20 units of housing and go to the building department and
And
get
the
their
same
building
thing
permit.
applies to the 60 houses going in on Foundry Street at the corner of Paquonicket and Foundry.
That's a compact neighborhood overlay district that was adopted by the town 7
2
years
years ago.
ago? No, that zoning was adopted about 7 years ago now.
When?
About 5 to 7 years ago. The compact neighborhood overlay district was adopted. And those are just that single family homes on smaller lots, 4 units per acre.
Okay. It's a lot of houses.
That area is changing, but it's becoming a lot more vibrant and it's consistent with a lot of the economic development goals the town had set for its target growth areas.
How about the ones where Benson's is on Union Street? Are they gonna do anything with that?
That's on hold right now.
That's a good spot too.
There's a lot of stuff buried
Yep.
in there.
All right. So I want to make sure everyone got the URL, the link for the website. Who wants it?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
This was very informative. I greatly appreciate your presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
All right. You have other business? I'm just going to pack up then.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And again, thank you for the input, feedback.
We took a walk over to the Belcher.
Up by me, the traffic will be horrendous.
You know what I got out of it? You guys notice it? We don't comply.
Yeah.
We didn't state funding.
Yeah, that's what they just said.
See, I didn't hear that. But that, so
We don't have
why
to do
are
anything.
they having these meetings to make sure you don't go behind their back?
I'm sorry.
Don't
Of
let
course,
us
I'll put it in the
know
minutes. You're all good.
what's
We
gonna
don't lose a
happen.
quorum. So.
And if you don't
No worries.
comply,
Thank you. It's
every
good to
time
see
you
you.
wanna do something,
And
your
Happy New Year.
taxes will
Happy New
go up.
Year.
And
They're
they
gonna
can,
go up anyway.
They're already gone.
Already
well,
going
like,
up
well, they
anyway.
keep, they
just got
can
my
keep
tax
going.
bill.
All
I
right.
figure I'm 82 years old by the time this goes into
Affect you.
effect,
to go
I'm
on.
already gone.
They're all
Well,
gone.
that's the main thing I got out of this, was the fact that if you don't comply, you lose funding.
Yeah, but they don't have, they comply on paper, they don't have to actually do anything.
Right.
It's just
And
lip
there's, and
service.
there's apartments going up on Washington Street,
Where?
where Scott's used to be, the liquor store. Used to be a computer, that mini mall right there, they zeroed it all out.
No.
Apartments
Where?
are going there.
I thought that was
One
gonna be,
twenty-three in Washington.
no, that's gonna be a car dealership.
No, that's a Volkswagen
Yeah,
car
that's-
dealership.
yeah.
Oh, is
going
that
in
going
there.
in there
That's
instead?
what's
They,
going
they
in
couldn't
there.
get the funding for
No.
the,
Because they had the funding, but because of COVID coming in, they lost the funding.
yeah, they
Okay.
couldn't get it back.
And if they went
All right,
across
so
the
let's,
street, you know, where that brown plaza is down on Belmont Street there, there's a
Back-
lot of water underneath there. Cause I know I lived there and there was any problems
Tell
with
me
the
about
pond,
water.
we had 3.5 feet of water on it in our basement.
What?
Yeah,
Where was
there's
this?
certain areas that has a lot
It's
of.
a it's the industrial park now, you know where Wendy's is?
Yeah.
Okay, we lived in back,
You got 3 feet of water?
3.5 feet of water.
Well, that was back
That's
when
what
water
went-
was,
that's
you
when
you
the
had a
dam
lot
let
more
go.
water in town for some reason.
river
All these other
From the
areas have
button
dried up.
factory.
It comes underneath.
Okay,
I didn't know it went under
Yeah.
the street.
all right,
Yeah, it's groundwater. A lot
gonna,
of streams under us.
That's
That's
why I
a lot
couldn't.
of water.
It sure was.
Would
It
it
took
blow
the
your
furnace
furnace?
and everything. Oh, yeah.
back to the agenda.
Okay, let's go here.
All right,
Programming update.
back
Yes.
to business.
I
Excellent.
hope you got all that information.
Yeah, every word. Programming update. So this will incorporate a few comments.
Where'd they go?
And I want to be conscious of everybody's. First of all, does everybody have time to hang around? We're not running on any time crunch for anybody.
I just have to be back here by noontime.
Okay, so we'll
You
get you
won't
back.
leave.
We'll be done by noon.
Excellent.
I gotta go home and eat.
So following up on our last conversation, our office had reached out to the Beanery. I think Marjorie had brought this up before for their service-related project. They expressed interest in partnering with us. We intend to work with them end of 2024 for their Christmas donation project, which is collecting items for seniors and homeless and sharing it out. So we would act as an intermediary to collect donations and then turn it over, given our where we're placed in the community in our role. Marjorie had also noted about the knitting class at the library, potentially partnering with them. It's my understanding that that program has been disbanded. They did not have enough participation and it sort of fizzled out. So it's not necessarily an option. Moving quickly, we have our next session of our chair massage on the 8th. It's $7 for a 15-minute chair massage. Those registrations are open in person or over the phone. I listed our ukulele class here, which begins next week, but I believe it just filled this morning. If you are interested, you're welcome to call. We intend to offer, given its popularity, again, probably in the late spring.
They should tie that in with canoe rides, you know. Somebody can be on the canoe and you get the guy on the ukulele.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
I'm showing my age.
Meditation with Doreen will begin on 1:30. That's going to be a sign-up program, no additional fee, but we will do punch cards for it. So you'll need a punch card each session to check in. Tax prep is our AARP program that begins on 2/1. I believe we are taking appointments already. This is a part of the free tax preparation program that we offer.
To the 1st of February.
Oh, I was told.
Oh, really?
That's when the
I was
program
gonna sign up
starts.
today.
Be
I
taking
I
names.
wanted to sign up last week when I came in and they said, no, you can't, not till the 1st of February.
So we're taking appointments for it. There may have been
So I'm
miscommunication.
out there, yes, must be mixed communication.
Sure.
I'm gonna sign up this year.
That will run through
Yes.
tax day on 4/18.
Are they taking, or they're not?
My understanding is we are. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm going out there, bitch.
Welcome to check with the front desk. and confirm the start date for registration. But I know we have the room blocked, we have our facilitators. As always, there are certain items that we won't be able to help with, and the preparers are not able to provide copies of the return after the conclusion of the program. I will try to have more information for that at our next meeting as well, and maybe one of the facilitators if they have time. We are offering a few free classes to start the year, help people that may not be involved in the punch card program come in and try some programs and recreational activities. It'll be specifically our Hatha Yoga class on Thursdays, Balance and Strength on Thursdays, and potentially a few others down the line that may be a little bit under participated in. So keep an eye out if you're looking to try and get engaged in fitness programs. Those ones will be free, no punch cards required. Pickleball is immensely popular still. We have filled 8 sessions through December and January. We're looking at filling a handful more in February. Entirely filled. It'll be indoors in the other room across the hall from us. Then last but not least, on February 27th, we'll be starting Yoga with Golfers with Doreen. This will be a paid program given the interest we had last year. It'll just be $10 a week over 4 weeks, so $40 to register. And it's going to be capped out at about 12 people. And that's all I have for the programming update. Short and sweet, but comprehensive. Okay. Any questions? No. Good job. Thanks.
So next up would be the community center. She's gone, but thought she'd be a good resource to talk with.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily have any updates. I did take some time over the weekend to think about it, and I did some digging. I know the town had done, I believe it's referred to, Stephanie would have been a great resource for this as well, the Doran Whittier report. I don't know if folks are familiar with that. It was essentially, from what I read, a comprehensive review of all town-owned facilities, buildings, not necessarily just properties. And in it, and reading through it, it prioritized a handful of buildings, including the schools, including the police building, the fire building, the DPW building, and this building. And what I'm pulling from it, and I hope it's not misinformed or I'm misrepresenting it, is with those buildings being consolidated, renovated, or new buildings being promoted, it seems like our building is next on that report in terms of priority. I think it's the last one left besides Town Hall, but I know Town Hall has some projects approved already. I don't believe anybody anticipates that building is moving. So my impression is this building may be next in a cycle, and that coincides with the capital request that ties into the next agenda item, which I'll talk about in a minute. The capital budget cycle for calendar year 25 for the parking. I won't get too deep into it, but the capital money we would request for any major changes to parking here would not be this calendar year. It would be proposed in December of 2024 to be approved at May 2025 town meeting. So I'm imagining in sort of that 4-month period plus a month on either end cycle, there would need to be a serious conversation of, is this a long-term home? Do we want to invest substantial amount of money as a resource, whether it maintains its current purpose or a different purpose at another time? So that is what I think is hopefully helpful context surrounding the community center and what I was able to gather in the meantime since our last meeting. I don't know if that sparks any discussion across members.
Well, I know that at one point they wanted to put an addition on, which...
On here?
Yeah. Which I guess at that point it would have been good, but I don't know what they did. You guys are probably...
They wanted a kitchen put on. That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
For one thing. They wanted to add this.
Yeah.
Here, make the kitchen bigger.
This is such a nice location. It's really lovely to come out here. I really like it here. But the possibility is you'll be going down to Depot Street. Is that it?
I'm not entirely sure. I think a lot of that is a bit of speculation with some of the things, and maybe a little bit more of putting puzzle pieces together with, the various projects being proposed in certain places around town. But it's hard to say. A lot of that stuff is still in its infancy.
Do you have a say in that?
I don't have a say in much.
Well, I think, if we're truly interested in doing something, we need find out basically where do we start? Who do we approach first? And get them to come to a meeting and let them know what
It's a good idea.
we think would be a good idea. Now, they built, the fire station, police station up in Northeastern is gonna be moved
Gone.
out when they build a new one. That building is gonna sit there. You got all the schools around there. That could become a very good community center. Morning, I know, you want a senior center. But for the most part, the seniors programming ends in the early afternoon.
Right.
You could make that move some things over. You could make it feasible for the students to use it also, because you got all the schools up there.
But
There's a
wasn't the
lot
idea-
of yeah, sure, asbestos in that building there.
I was gonna say, wasn't the idea of building a new thing because this
Because
one
the
becomes so
asbestos.
obsolete and so
Plus
expensive to?
the septic system, they say, is always backing up.
Well, you shouldn't have put the. I'm
Well,
not saying-
yeah,
I'm not
okay.
gonna say anything, but, you got everything right there. Maybe that plot would be, I wanna see buildings be repurposed instead of torn down and spending money on a new building. That's my feelings.
How much land is this building on? Goes back to,
Yeah,
why
back
can't they, I know it looks like there's a lot of rocks out there, but why can't they do some sort of addition to it?
they could, they can. I just wanna see a bigger building so you can do more
Well,
programs.
as I say, addition.
Yeah.
You can add right on to this one, bring this out this way.
But we need to talk to people to find out what can be done and, put a bug in their ear.
I mean, this building is an old building,
It
but
is.
still is a nice building.
But it seems to me that the COA is very vibrant. I mean, you have a lot of people who participate here, right? With all
Yeah,
your classes and,
My perspective is, I'm sorry, Don, I didn't mean to step
No,
on what you were
go ahead.
saying. My perspective is that with a lot of the programming that we've been able to put in the last 16 months, 2 years, it's sort of highlighted or brought to light
the limitations.
some limitations and things that may not have been necessarily thought of before. In my opinion, when you have a meditation program in this particular room and across the hall you have a Zumba class, those things aren't necessarily very compatible or complementary programs. And it's not something we would have realized until we started trying new things and implementing new types of programs. So with that, I think that is a starting point for some conversations in and of itself. I do think it may be, this may be more of a recommendation and opinion in my mind, that it may be a little we're on maybe the precipice of appropriate timing to start discussing this and going down the line, given the nature and the context of the conversation that was around what was sort of a complicated and heated topic of the police and fire, and some of the financial implications that came along with that. I think if we jump into a conversation too soon, it may not be well received from the public at large, and we may be poisoning the well, so to speak. That's not to say we put it off indefinitely, but January 4th or February 1st may not be the perfect timing for us.
What I don't understand is why are a lot of the eastern people going to West Bridgewater instead of coming here? I know a lot of them are.
Because there's different program. I don't know how big their senior center is.
So another thing, it goes right back to where we had to sign that paper.
What
But
paper?
the
Oh,
lawyer,
yes, they want us to sign it for this month.
What are you talking about?
but the lawyer that they have for the town wants
Easton
Every-
or West
yes.
Bridgewater? Easton?
Easton. They want everybody that goes to some sort of a
Yeah,
program to sign saying that they're not liable.
I can provide a little bit of color for this. So yes, the
Liable for
liability
injury?
waiver. Yeah, so
Yes.
essentially the town, not just our town, the town I live in, the town I lived in previously, the school I worked for previously. If you engage in a recreational programming, in like 99% of settings, you have to fill out a liability waiver in some way, shape, or form. Protects the town as an institution, and at another layer, you all as taxpayers, that something happened, we're not shelling out a ton of money unnecessarily. And it doesn't necessarily prevent folks from engaging in a lawsuit with the town, as I understand it, but it's required. It's something you fill out to sign up for Facebook, something you sign to go to an amusement park. And I'm not sure why West Bridgewater may or may not have
They
people fill out
don't.
waivers.
There's other towns that don't either.
Because there is an insurance there. If you pay for a program, the insurance covers. So there's the owner covered because you paid. If it was free, the insurance doesn't cover you. Don't ask me how it works, but that's how it works.
Many times these waivers are hidden in some ways, or you sort of fly by them. If you're signing your kids up for T-ball, for example, and you go through an online portal, as you're clicking through there, there's a waiver in there, and it's very, very common. It's done in almost every industry, in the United States from a liability perspective. So I know that's not necessarily reassuring to some people, and we try to be transparent, having it be a paper copy, something we hand. You know you're opting into it, and you're signing it before you come into these. We don't necessarily want to misrepresent anything, but it's something we do have to do.
It doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I mean, it seems pretty prudent.
I fully understand some people having some sort of hesitation or reservation about doing that, but it's just the reality of where we're at with our
We
programming.
didn't start signing things until this was changing over to community.
Right,
We never
No.
signed anything.
nothing.
We just paid our $15 a month, and that's all with no signing. But when they started changing over, taking a senior center away
Yeah.
and bringing it in as a community center, that's when you had to start signing a paper.
That's when it happened.
So this is a community center now?
Yes.
It's not a
Yes,
senior center?
no, it's not a senior center.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Click it in. No, it's now the health and community
but-
center.
So we're circling back to the community center topic. I'd ask the group, what has changed for the worse with making this a community center,
There's a
where
change.
the programming that
There's a
happens
definite change.
for younger people is in the evening when most
No,
of
it's
the
a
older
definite
adults are around.
change. It's an attitude change. Everything has changed. I used to walk in here and it felt like home because it was for the seniors.
I'm sorry
No.
to hear that.
No,
I
but
truly
now you
am.
walk in here and it's changed. I can't explain it.
That's one reason that a lot of them left and went to West Bridgewater. Because it's all seniors down there.
But you have that feeling. You come in here and it's, I can't explain it. I don't enjoy coming in here any longer. That's it. I used to enjoy coming here and meeting people and talking to. Now I come in here and I'm here.
A lot of people feel the same way.
Thank you. I thought it was just me.
No, why? They were going to West Bridgewater.
I've been thinking about going down there.
I've started going back on Fridays, one Friday a month.
To West Bridgewater?
I started
Do
there.
you have anything to add?
No,
I
do
hope we're
that.
not
I'm new
boxing you
here.
up.
That's
it's
where I
just-
learned Swedish Weaver.
And
I'm
it's
sorry. I
how
know
they
we're getting
did
a little
it,
bit away
too.
from the topic at
We
hand,
are
but-
we
Well,
are
I'm not going
a
back to work, so that's okay.
we are a
Excuse me, that's my stupid fault.
Council on Aging board, quote unquote. But we were never notified that this building was changing.
It probably
I'm
predates
still
me.
here.
We
So
were
it's
never
hard to say.
notified.
When did it happen?
First of this year, right before the first, it happened
Now,
last
that's
year.
good.
So,
More or less,
Ah.
and it officially
All right, they're
became,
still doing
because they
it.
were told out there not to
Okay,
say
fine.
council on aging when someone calls. They have to say the health and, what's the first thing?
I'm sorry.
Health and
that's
Community
all right,
Center.
Gene.
That's when
Um,
it changed.
So a number of years ago, I think, and I'll come a full point or all the way back around to the point you had just made. My understanding is that certainly pre-COVID, I think it was maybe 2015 or 2016, maybe 2017. Kristen Kennedy, who I think most of you know, took over as the Director of Health and Community Services.
Yes.
When she took over, there was a COA director who they were paying a full salary to. There was a recreation program coordinator director that had sort of a subsidized salary, was still on the payroll for the town. And then there was a VSO that the town had, and then they had an outreach coordinator too. So there's sort of 4 full salaries that were being paid that way, and everybody was sort of acting in unique silos, serving like the one very tailored community with like their very niche roles. Over the years through COVID, it turned from Board of Health and all those sort of specific divisions into Health and Community Services, where it was an across-the-board model that, in my opinion, is a bit forward-thinking, where you have a recreation professional, and this is over a number of years. This is a bit reductive, but this is sort of the short version because I know we've had a relatively long meeting. You have a recreation professional in me that doesn't have limits in terms of who I can program to. My knowledge expands beyond youth t-ball, and I hope that reflects in a lot of the programs we've offered here. And then you had somebody in Korea Honan who has a lot of experience in casework, helping veterans, was a veteran himself, that served everybody from financial resources. So you're not paying a lot of people to do very little work. You're paying a few people to do a lot of really impactful work that their expertise, broadly overlaps with. And simultaneously, these people can work together to make a greater impact. And that's what we've seen. If you look at the numbers of people who have come in this building, the people we've served for transportation, people we've served for veterans, while that number's remained flat, the elderly population, the population that's a lower socioeconomic status that's in need, those numbers have all gone up that we've been able to serve with this change. So when I believe this has been a community center for a number of years, whether it's well advertised or not, it's been sort of a part of a larger rebranding and transformation from COA, Rec Department, Board of Health, to Health and Community Services, where we've tried to offer better services across the community. That's involved in rewrapping the buses, answering the phones in a different way. And a lot of the study that we found in the age-friendly action report supports that people want an inclusive, multi-generational place to go. There's a lot of research out there that if seniors only interact with seniors, your social network starts to shrink, and that ripples into a lot of negative health factors, mental and social health factors, as you start to continue to age, versus if this is an intergenerational, really inclusive building. And a lot of the downsides of like programming here in the evening, it doesn't truly, in my opinion, it may be fact, impact the folks that are here between 8 and 4 o'clock-ish on weekdays.
What happens in the evening? You have high school kids or
So
elementary?
yeah, so evenings we offer intergenerational ballroom dance classes when our instructor's available. It's the same instructor who teaches our line dancing, so we sort of cross-advertises there. We offer, right now we're running a youth floor hockey program that's taught by parents in the community. And coming up, we have a program for individuals with disabilities or no disabilities. They just want to be in an inclusive environment, for sort of a winter sports exposure program that's going to go over the course of 8 weeks. And then on weekends, we offer, again, an intergenerational pickleball, and we do a number of educational seminars here during the week and on the weekend too.
That's a lot.
We've come a long way in doing a lot of different things that sort of buck the trend of, what I've been able to ascertain from old marketing materials for the community.
Again, I'll say, we are the Council on Aging, and we should have been informed when all of this was going on. We should have been informed. Why, we were Council on Aging Board, why not?
I don't have an answer to that. I got
I know
here
you can't answer that.
in
Well,
2021.
you went quite a while without meetings. That was part of the problem, was it, during COVID?
We'd have our meeting once a month when I got on this board.
Well,
We
we
had a
had
meeting
Zoom
once a
meetings.
month.
Third
And
third
Kristen,
Thursday of every month.
every month, and Kristen Kennedy was our person that sat here with us.
'Cause I used to go, I first got on, I sat there and tried to look up minutes for the meetings.
Oh, you probably couldn't find them.
No, there was nothing.
Well, it should have been.
Well, we're a little bit more diligent about
Well,
that
no,
now.
that was
I
part of the
never,
whole
I
thing.
don't wanna go into, I just felt we were slighted. That's the word to use.
Yeah, so
As seniors, we were slighted.
so tying this back
And I know,
into
like you said,
the
a lot of people have left.
agenda item here, community centers similar to what's been advocated for the schools and for the Department of Public Works, Public Safety building. I do not think that a standalone community center that's just for younger generations and a true council on aging building that's just for older adults would be approved as two standalone projects that would have relatively high costs. I think something that's a bit more unified. For example, I think Plymouth may have something similar to that. I think Norwood.
Some of them have senior community center. Senior, instead of health and community, it's senior and community center.
Yeah,
They're the ones that put it together.
Yeah, so the point that I'm attempting to make, and hopefully I'm making it well, is that this town seems to have more of an appetite for joint resources that have multi-purposes, particularly when there's not a lot of conflict. And if you even increase the number of rooms in a building that were available for programming, there'd be even less overlap and even noticing that there were any sort of different features that it wasn't specific for one population.
And I have one more complaint, but I'll wait till next month for that one.
All right. So I hope that helps. I don't necessarily want to take away from any group discussion, but that's sort of my perspective on it.
Okay, no problem. And the parking's for 2025, you said parking.
Yeah, so Matt, if you're ready to move on to next, I can provide an update. So the parking study, I know I touched on it in that agenda item very briefly. The last update I provided is that we received the conceptual plans that were requested. The designs conveyed between 11 and 21 additional parking spots. Obviously, those two plans have different price points. The initial funding provided from, I believe it was the prior town meeting, was at $150,000. It sounds like this is going to be an additional $200,000 beyond what we requested. So that ties into what I was saying before of an additional capital request needing to go in. Once these, I believe we're waiting on a few other components of the request, but this is sort of an anticipated baseline expense for us for the parking. I know the group before had a few questions, and I took some time to chase down some answers. It sounds, my understanding is that prior to my arrival, there were plans to move the trash cans that would occupy what could be an additional 2 spaces. My understanding is that if you move, that's been entertained, but there's not a suitable alternative that makes more sense from where they can be accessed by a trash, or that applies to local code. I was not the one who did that, but I'm just passing on messages. I believe Marjorie or another member had solicited or asked if donations were a realistic option to subsidize part of the work. My understanding is not for part of this type of project. If it was something that would be more likely to be donated to versus a parking lot, that might be an option. And again, as I mentioned before, we're still waiting on a few other components of the formal bid. And once we have all those numbers, I'll pass it on. But I think at this point, this is sort of the most comprehensive update that I can give with regard to parking. So the project or the conversation surrounding the project is moving on. But the timeline of it appears that it would be more of the second capital cycle that we'd be looking at. So it's on the horizon. It's seems like there is some date. And then, if you look at other projects, this is a little bit of speculation, but the pickleball project at the high school most recently was done in the summer. That's a rather large undertaking. I'm sure there would be some basic, obviously, rip out of what exists, grading and reapplying. So that may be a relatively comparable timeline of a few months to complete a project like that. So I don't necessarily want to put a tentative end date on it because it's not necessarily up to me, but this is sort of a broader picture.
It's up to DPW, isn't it?
Sorry?
Isn't it up to the DPW what
Yeah,
is
certainly.
going to be done?
It needs to fit in with their other projects. I'm fairly confident we would subcontract out at least one, if not more than one part of it. But again, this is very early stage conversation. Just want to make sure the board feels informed.
Thank you.
Of course.
Move on to the acceptance of the minutes from December 7th. Entertain a motion to accept.
I second.
Okay, get a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Staff notes.
I do not have any notes for this meeting.
I have something I wanted to bring up. I found a new tax program for Massachusetts seniors. It's called the Circuit Breaker Tax Program, and it's for seniors who are over the age of 65 whose property tax exceeds 10% of their annual gross income, which is pretty inclusive of a lot of seniors. I was hoping that maybe you could put a note in the next newsletter that this is available. It's called the Circuit Breaker Tax Program.
I believe this is something that
I think that's not, Shine does that.
Tracy Levine, our benefits and grants navigator, would be in the know about. I'll see if I can get some details.
It would be good to
We
put
can
in
certainly
the
advertise it.
newsletter
Yes.
because I don't think many people know about it.
So the taxes have to be
10%, property tax exceeds 10% of your annual income. And
I
I have,
remember he mentioned that to me once. You own property? I said, no. He says, you might have a circuit breaker.
it also applies to rentals. But I think the
Well, thank God I'm
qualifications
not
is less.
10%. Am I 10% of my? No, I don't think so. I think I'm okay.
mine's
That's why I stay-
really
That's why I stay
mine's
where I am.
really jumped.
Yes, I heard that.
Geez, I
taxes
got a
has
big
gotten
one
terrible.
too. Yeah, so it just might be something that was helpful for a lot of people. I just wanted to mention it to you.
I'm shocked when I got my tax bill. Oh my God.
Any other notes from members?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
To adjourn?
I like that one.
I
I
like that.
second
That
it.
was quick.
Okay, that was second. Okay,
Okay.
we're done.
We all say aye.
Hi.
I have
Aye.
our next meeting as the 1st of February at 10 a.m.
1st of February?
First Thursday. Is that the 1st February?
If I read my calendar,
First Thursday.
if I read my calendar
I
correctly.
don't have my calendar.
That's the first, huh?
Matt, balance out.
Let's see.
Okay.
Yes, that would be February 1st.
Bring in the,
I can read.
bring in February.
It's terrific news. Excellent. So, all right, so adjourn
I got marked my
11:35.
calendar.